Good morning and welcome to the CAD-1 Revit Suites workflow. My name is Stan Henney, the Business Development Manager here at CAD-1. And to my left, your right, I have Dr. Brian Juge, AIA. And we also have a special guest with us today, Carla Fitch, who is our Major Accounts and Specialized Training coordinator here at CAD-1, and you might ask what specialized training we have. Well, we are branching out into some new areas of remote training and at your desk learning and specialized training for groups like the Independent Electrical Contractors Association, the Plumbers Association, and so forth. So really going in some new directions with training, and Carla was going to sit in today. Say hi, Carla.
Hi.
There we go. All right. Rich says good morning to us. This is going to be kind of a fun webinar. The reason for this webinar, quite frankly, is because so many people ask us, what's new in the product or what's Revit about? And Revit's certainly a very important product, or Civil 3D, or Navisworks, or any of the individual products. But what people are starting to realize is that the suites are really the product from Autodesk anymore, and the workflow that can be developed to take someone through design into visualization, into analysis, into constructability, whatever it may be, is really becoming the important factor here. So we have a few housekeeping slides that we'll go through, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Juge and let him start the meat of the thing. So most of you have done a GoToMeeting, I'm sure, and you know how all this works. If you want to minimize the console so you can see the full screen, hit the little orange arrow. Hopefully there's the raise your hand button. If everybody would raise their hand to let us know that they can hear us.
All right, at least a couple of you.
There we go. Sounds like people can hear us. So you're using the mic and speakers or telephone buttons.
Some of us are giving us high fives out there.
Exactly. And the most important box there is the questions box. If you do have questions, feel free to ask those, and we will try to answer them as close to in context as possible. A couple other things that I want to bring up before we get into the heart of this thing. CAD-1 has run our Customer Appreciation Day for many years now, and it's been a favorite with so many of our customers, and we all love doing it. This year, the date for that, save the date, is June 27th. And it will be at the Marriott, the new Marriott Hotel on the Boulder Turnpike. It's going to be a great event. We're working on getting all the speakers finalized, so we'll have more information on that soon. The other thing I want to bring up is that this is the last 10 days or so of Autodesk's current promotion, and that would basically be if you upgrade some older software, 2009 to 2013 software, to the current version, you will get 1 year of subscription at no cost. Now, as many of you know, and some of you probably don't but need to know, Autodesk will be doing away with upgrades whatsoever next February 1st. So if you do have older software and you want to retain the value of that software and the usability, please contact us sometime this year, and let's make sure that you're upgraded and on subscription so that you can stay current. Brian, I'm turning it over to you now because people are tired of hearing me.
Well, good morning. I'm never tired of hearing you, Stan. All right, so we're going to go through and talk about the workflows itself. Not going to get too much in actually using each piece of software, but just how we transition from Revit into these other pieces of software out there. But first, we should talk about why are we using these pieces of software. I want to start off by just talking a little bit about what software should I be picking to do a different product in. So here we have the Revit. If we're doing it for a proof of concept out there, it has ways of communicating with the team. It also has ways where we can either do that inside the software, or it has the ability to go out and render that on the cloud. So it's good there as kind of a good scenario. The second one would be Showcase, and it's easy to use. That's usually one of the most common things that I hear about it. Talking about schematic design, design review, just those types in there at those particular stages, or for final review, it should be in there. The interactive presentation on there, I like to point out, I usually like to name this program as the client interface. I can have the client there right with me and do a live demo in front of the client, walk through things with them. Sounds like our audio is going in and out, so I'll try to speak up. Never been known to be one that was quiet, so I'll be a little bit louder. How's that? You guys let me know if this is working out for you. Yeah, to have a client there right with me, go in, change the different materials in my project, and it's nice to have the client there live with you, so you can go through those iterations really quickly. It's more intuitive than having to have Revit there to kind of switch things out where the client's going, well, what's this menu, what's that menu, the type of thing. Showcase gives you the ability of doing it right on the screen. And the last one's going to be, kind of your best scenario is going to be 3ds Max design. It's more the higher end for a true animation where we can have people walking around, doors opening, cars moving, those types of things. It's what the movie industry and the film industry and all them, movies are films, gaming industry used to kind of animate things. So it has this big presence out there in the way to, that we can interact with it. I like to tell people, hey, it seems to be a little daunting when we get in there, but I'm going to try to, in the future, pull this apart and give it to us in small bits and chunks where we don't have to master the program, but we just can go in and use different parts of it to take it out there. So we have our kind of our good, better, best, Revit being a really good piece of software to use, Showcase being maybe a little bit better, easier to go in and change the materials in, and the best scenario would be obviously 3ds Max design. Stan, looks like there's something to say here.
Well, I do have something to say. I have a couple things to say. First off, movies are a film, but film isn't always movies.
That's true.
Second, a couple things. You will note that these are the badges for the 2014 product. Some of the 2015 product is out, not the complete product line from Autodesk, and our technical team will be going to 2015 product training in mid-May. So we are going to hold up on doing what's new presentations until after they get back, so we can actually do live presentations rather than PowerPoints. Last thing I want to mention is what software should I render in, as it says up on the top. The third service that you are entitled to if you are on subscription is the cloud rendering tool that you can also render in. It's noted under the Revit there. We aren't covering that right today. We did a webinar on that a couple weeks ago. Yes. Brian Mackey did. The reason we aren't covering that today is because we're trying to show you what's in the box.
Yeah, what
you get, so
and the specific workflow process, right, when you want to use Revit and take it through this other process.
Right.
We might do a little bit on what's new in Revit, only because we've been playing with the betas out, so it's going to be dependent upon when they release it for us to play with. But all in all, like Stan said, we're going to wait for a lot of the 15 products out there before we get into a full gamut on it. But stay tuned. I was hoping to show you something today on those, but we don't have that out yet. So moving right along, what are Suites workflows? We can see it's a mechanism for exporting and engineered design from a source Autodesk product to a target product for detailed rendering or animation. In other words, it's the buttons you want to click to take it from Revit into another piece of software. Okay, what building design suites are these available in? And there's a little list right there. And most of you probably have a particular type out there, but we can see that most of us have building design suite or infrastructure design suite out there. And I'd like to go just to get a little bit of a pull. So I'm going to launch a little survey in here. And if you guys wouldn't mind just answering, so we just see what our audience is using. So if you just go in there and take a look at that, we've got some people voting. And we've got a really strong contingent in one particular area. I'm going to close it up in just a second here. Looks like just about everybody's report, so I'm going to close this up right now. And there we go. Now we can go in and share that on the screen, and we can see that most of you are on the building design suite, which that's pretty good. So I've got no one on the infrastructure, and you probably would need Brian Haley for that. But there we go. We can see that the poll results in there.
The reason we asked about infrastructure, though, is that both of the infrastructure premium and ultimate suites do contain some element of Revit, so we thought some folks might join us from that world.
Yeah. The other thing I want to point out is the different pieces of software that we can use. So I know we're talking about Revit today, but we have 3ds Max Design. We have workflows that go from Autodesk and Inventor as well as Revit. In Showcase, you have Inventor and Revit that are available. And I also want to look at or just talk about two other programs. And one is InfraWorks. And currently there is no, and I say currently 2014 version, there is no workflow formal workflow process from taking a model from Revit to an InfraWorks. There is a process out there, and it can be done. But this one what we're about to look at isn't necessarily in there. But it's something that I'm seeing coming over shortly. And then there's one for Navisworks. There's Navisworks. That should also be talked about too. And there is a process you can go and out there on the Exchange and download a workflow to bring your Revit model directly over. But it's not part of the workflow buttons. But I do want to bring those up. I'm thinking, especially in InfraWorks, that we're going to see more movement in that direction as time goes on. A lot of the other things is, why would we use the suites workflow? And what I'd like to say is that it's a way to bring our model in. We all know about that. But when the Revit model gets pulled in, we're going to be doing all this animation. We're going to be doing all these material changes and scene cuts and making different camera views. And what we don't want is to lose any of that stuff that we've already done. So we might have come in and changed the material out from some Revit type of stone to some better looking stone that we have in Showcase or 3ds Max. So I don't want that to be lost. This workflow allows me to preserve those changes, or to set up or bring over cameras or bring over the materials or whatever I need to from Revit. So there's different options, and that's what we're going to look at a bit today in here.
Brian, if I could, InfraWorks and Navisworks are important products. They're really two kind of cornerstone type products. Many of you on the building side may not have heard of InfraWorks yet, but it is an amazing tool, and you'll see much more of this, especially if you're in land planning or anything along those lines in the future. Navisworks is really the cornerstone of the construction coordination and model verification industry. So again, two very important products.
Now I'm going to launch one other quick survey here, and just getting an idea of what people currently use, and maybe some of you are using some of these other products out there. We've got Revit, Showcase, Max, other software, and that could be, Photoshop ever using, and then I have good old hand rendering,
which you still use.
Occasionally I do. So it's not the end of the world, and happy to see that I'm not the only one.
You just like the smell of the ink.
Oh yes. Hey, there's nothing wrong with some 80 markers and some colored pencils. So I'm not a. I
know.
I wish I had another follow-up to see what other software people are using. Probably Photoshop would be my guess. Those doing the others, if you wouldn't mind just answering a question, what other software you use. I know there's a couple of you out there. So with that, I'm going to close the polls in just a second. 3, 2, 1. All right. Close those out, and I'll share that with you just to see what we've got going on. And looks like primarily everybody's using Revit. Look, we might have one or two people actually using Showcase or 3ds Max. The good old hand rendering is still higher than either one of those standing alone. And then we got 20% over there on other software. So I'm assuming that's probably SketchUp or with a combination of Photoshop involved with that. So there's some different things in there. So yeah, go 80 markers. We're coming in strong at 8% there.
Well, and we have a, this gets back to, rendering has some great built-in, or Revit has some great built-in rendering tools in it, and so it's very easy. You don't have to leave the Revit world to do some rendering. But again, two things. Not many people know about Showcase yet. Great tool, very easy to use. And then the perception of 3D Max Design is that it's very hard to use, so a lot of people shy away from it. But with the proper workflows, it really does go much easier.
Yeah. We have one person, Visual or AGI 32. I'm not familiar with the second one. Rendering when we're doing lighting counts. Okay, so never mind. I understand what's going out there. So we got James who's pointing out a couple other pieces of software, which is nice to see out there. All right.
And I will say that while I respect what James is doing, and he's using some very good software for lighting calcs and that type of thing, 3D Max does a very nice job of very accurate lighting as well.
Yes. Should also point out, look forward to 2015 for those of you doing hand rendering and stuff like that. You're going to see, or those that are falling in love with SketchUp and what it can do. There's going to be something you might take a look for in Revit that's coming out.
There's some real nice stylization
tools that are coming out there. So if you haven't heard about it yet, there's a kind of a hand sketch thing that's going to be available for you, kind of like SketchUp. I'll give you my personal opinion of it later, yeah, look forward to that. Okay, now on with it. So what are the suites workflows? So in the application menu, there is a pull down where we can get into the suites workflow, and I'll show you guys this in a second. And that would pull up this workflow manager in here. Now in this particular dialog, we can see that there are some presets that we have set up for either 3ds Max or Showcase to go pull this data in there. And these are presets, and you can set up your own, build your own presets in here. And then we're going to take a look at that a little bit more. So we can select that, get in here, and we go look in these options. I'm going to run through these kind of options in here and see what we have. What is available? So just clicking the buttons might give you a workflow, but is there more I can get out of this software when we're bringing this in? So we have at the top, we have a little visualization of what you're going to name it in the description in there. And then under the settings, we get into linking, file linking. How is the file going to be linked between these two pieces of software? So in Revit, we have the base model, and when I bring it into 3ds Max, and this is the Max row in here that we're looking at. I should point that out. How is it handling the model? How is it handling the materials? What is it bringing over when we link this particular thing from one side to the other? Can this link be modified? And when this is modified, when I push the new Revit model over, what happens to all the changes that I made in 3ds Max? So that's kind of what this first part in here. So here's the target scene. We can see if we're going to go in there and allow the user to pick every single time what's being done with the model, or create a new 3ds Max scene file for it. And then we've got other ones in here. Existing link found with target scene. So is it going to reload the source file when we bring that in? Is it detaching it and making a new link or adding new links? So if we have different links into these files, how is it handling all those different links that are attached in? Because we know as Revit, not just necessarily the architect's file. We're going to have a structural file, an MEP file, all these other things in there. How is it handling these different things? Or even linking the file back and forth, because in 3ds Max, that file becomes almost symbiotic, that we can go in and make changes in one side or the other, and there's kind of workflows for developing that. So I can push the file from Revit into 3ds Max, and there's kind of a way of looping that back into Max. Although I found it doesn't always work as intended, but it is in there. The next part is getting into the materials dialog. You know, so I go in and I change those materials in 3ds Max. How is that going to affect it when I push Revit back in? What materials am I going to use when I create the 3ds Max file? So I can see, am I using the Revit materials or the Max materials? Those libraries are shared between actually the 3 programs. All 3 programs share the materials library. So when you're bringing in the Revit files, which library is it going to look for? Which library is it going to be hosting this information to? So we can go in and dictate how that's going to be transpiring between them.
And Brian, this workflow is found in the help sections.
No, it's actually it's in the application menu. So it'll be the big blue or magenta R, depending on which version of the software you're on, up there. And I'll show you guys that in a second.
John, real quick, we did Brian Mackey did a webinar about, I think it was about 2
months ago? It wasn't that long ago.
2 weeks, maybe a month ago, I can't remember, that on the cloud rendering that should be posted on our website in our YouTube page. You can go to our website and look at webinars and then archives, and you should be able to find it. I'm sure it's posted by now, and we will be doing some more of those, kind of a part 2 of that one in the summer. And then we will be showing some of Showcase today, and we have also done some of those in the past. We'll also be doing another Showcase webinar probably a little later in the summer as we come out with the 2015 stuff.
Yeah, my understanding is Showcase has changed a bit, but yes, you're right, Stan. There was we did record a Showcase webinar about a year, maybe a year and a half ago on that. It is on our website under the archives, so that's available online or on YouTube at the CAD-1 webinars out there. So both of those should be available. If the cloud rendering one isn't up yet, that just means we need to work a little bit faster on posting that.
Box Denny's ears.
Yeah, so we'll get on her if it's not out there. So you should have that available shortly. Kind of continuing on, we have the include by type, specify which object types are imported from the source model. So in here we can choose, are we bringing in the lights? So getting back to kind of the earlier part, when we were looking at interior rendering versus an exterior rendering in here, the interior rendering actually, as part of the setup, actually has lights on, where the exterior one doesn't. So if you want to bring lights that you set up in from Revit, and by lights we don't mean the physical light, but the light source. So when I go into the visibility graphic overrides and I turn on light source, am I bringing that over? The model the model portion will come over, at least on the architectural side. Can't speak on the other part, but is the light source coming over? Do I have all that function in here? Yes, if I were to choose this or click on including lights in here. We also have the daylighting system that can be brought over from that. Let me see if I'm on the right part.
And if you're hearing a lot of thumping, that's not the Russian army invading the room. It's Mr. Juge is fond of thumping the table as he talks for emphasis.
Yeah. I should also point out I've been up. I had a little one up all night with me.
Just kidding, Brian. Just having
So I'm
fun.
probably not on my A game right now. I'm on my A- game, Stan. There you go.
There you go.
All right, so we've got the daylighting system. So if you're going in and setting up your site with the sun, importing all your site material, and we want to do a solar analysis, it'd be good to bring that in, because I've already set that all up into 3ds Max. I want to bring that over. The next part is the cameras. So if you've got the different cameras in here, you can bring those over, although I haven't had great success with that every single time, but we'll give it a shot today in there. There's also one for creating a helper at the model origin, and some people are like, well, what is a helper? Sometimes it's called a dummy in 3ds Max, but it's usually an item that let me take a step back. Step back. In 3ds Max, we can develop a dummy or a helper or an object that we can use to animate, to make an item flow. So if I want to make a car move, I might draw a path and I put a helper out there or a dummy object that is a cube. And I make the cube move. And then what I do is I host the car to the cube. So I do all the animation with this really simple object, this cube item, use that out there to animate and move things through, and then I host the other object with it. Well, what this is going to do is create a helper model at the origin point, so our project base point, that the main model will be associated with, so that when I'm bringing in that site plan or that project or whatever, I can just turn that kind of thing off and interact just with that little helper item without having my program run really slow or my machine run really slow. So if I'm on a low amount of RAM, I can use that in here. So it's kind of a nice thing to go in there, but people not knowing what it is, it's like, okay, what is the helper? I don't really know. Maybe who cares about it? So it's an object you might want to play with. And then we also have the smooth adjacent faces. It just causes it to be a little bit sharper, things like that when we're bringing those in. The other part is this combine entities that we find down at the bottom. So we don't want to, we could bring in the whole model as individual pieces. So each wall is its own element. Each roof is its own element type of thing. We can combine those by categories, which is what we're most familiar with. So as we're bringing this model over, all the roofs are on one category, all the walls, you know, all the furniture, all the lighting, all the plumbing systems, things like that. We can bring it in as one solid object, so I can bring that in there, or not combine anything at all, and then they're just kind of loose themselves, or by families. So we have all these different options in here when we want to bring these particular items in. So that's just kind of our workflow in there. So now I'm going to go in and fire up Revit and then show you this workflow from Revit into 3ds Max. So let me get out of this real quick. So here we have a little school project in here in Revit, and I can spin it around and see there we are. I should apologize ahead of time. I'm running all 3 pieces of software at the same time right now, so let's see how good my machine can handle up to this.
And you may see a little, because of the go-to interface, you may see a little bit of jerkiness there.
Yeah.
It looks smooth on our machine here, but we've noticed it kind of jerks on the viewer's machine.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the Suites workflow. So you can see it's under the application menu and going down. And that's why we want to talk about that this is the formal workflow process out here. I have this specific button. I'm not going to export it out as an FBX or ADSK or some other format. It's going to be going in as a Suites workflow in here. And I have these presets that are all inside. So I could select any one of these. So let's say under the exterior one. And here are the settings. I can go in the settings. I'm just going to close out of this because I'm going to open up the whole thing. But you can see this is the presets that this particular thing is already set up to. But if I wanted to customize my own, what I'll come in and do is I'll go back over to my Suites workflow. And inside here, I'm going to go to Access the Manager and Customize Design Suite Workflow. Okay, we can look at any one of these. So I'll just select one. And then if I right-click, that's the thing. There's no indication that you can right-click in here, but you can. I can either duplicate these settings or going in here. So I'll go to duplicate, and I've got this one. So now I'll go in here. After I duplicated it, you see it makes a copy, and then I'll get in the settings in here, and you can see that I have this whole dialog that we were just talking about. So I'm just going to set this up as my custom settings and then run through these a little bit. Oops, custom settings. Now one thing I should point out is that you do not necessarily have to have the software running. So I don't need to have 3ds Max running to get this done. Depending on my choices, it might take a little bit longer time to execute these commands. I'm getting a little tinny. All right, so I'll move the microphone closer to me. I think it's not facing the microphone. But I can get in here and sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Got it back on board. Okay. So I can go in here and set up all these settings in here and really look at how all these things are going to work out. By having the other piece of software open, I've had failures when I haven't, so I'm going to have it launched already, and then it's going to open up and actually make another session. So that's just kind of the interesting part with what's going on, but I just wanted to be reliable. So in here I've got the target scene. Either ask the user when I go to run it, or I can make a new 3ds Max file every single time. Where the existing links can be found. So I can go reload the source, detach and create a new link when I go to run it, so it'll make it a completely new one, or keep and add the new link instance. So I have all these different choices in here. So I'll use the Maxine material definitions rather than the Revit ones in here, and keep the Maxine material definitions on a reload. So if I go in and redefine these, I can have the materials that I pick in 3ds Max stay, and the new any Revit changes wouldn't override those, so the Max ones will stay. We can bring in the lights. I'm not going to put those in here, but I've got the daylighting system, the camera, and the helper. Now, in this thing, I've set up several cameras, but I'm finding that not all of them are always being brought over in here. And then I've got the last part in here. How do I want to combine these entities? And I'm going to go in here and do that by category. I'll save these out. So I've got this in, and then I can come over and run this particular thing. And it'll take a couple minutes to do. It actually doesn't take as long as one would think. Now I've got the selecting these options that I left myself for. I'll just hit continue. Let that finish out, and it takes about a minute. Usually is what I've been running through. We can already see that this particular layer system, no, that's not from Revit. That's actually from 3ds Max. So we can see it's already starting to look at this kind of things and open it up in there.
Eric, to your question, Eric, Brian made the comment earlier that running 3 pieces of software on his computer here, and it's a pretty beefy computer, can be a little problematic. Eric mentions the same thing. To your question, can you give any recommendations on kind of which is best to upgrade, processor, RAM, graphics card? First off, I'd say wait until you get the 2015 software before you if it's not just super critical, before you upgrade anything, so that you're not upgrading something that then is changed in 2015. And from there, I'd probably, Brian, you can help me out here, but I'd probably go in the order of RAM first, maybe processor second, or graphics card. You can kind of tell if it's graphics issues and go with your graphics card. If it's, just general slowness, maybe it's the processor. So,
yeah, unfortunately, when we get into talking about rendering, it's kind of you got to go all out in all these areas, which is unfortunate. Just to give you an FYI on what I have on mine, I'm using 16 gigs of RAM right now. I'm actually one of the older machines as far as the tech department goes. I have a 1.5 gig graphics card and quad-core processors, and off the top of my head, I couldn't think of what I'm running them off of. But that's kind of a little bit of background on what I have on here. Now, if I wouldn't be doing this at the end of the day, I probably would restart my machine, make sure I've dumped my RAM, and cleaned all the stuff out of there. So it's good to fire off a new machine. That's one of the processes I'd say to go and do, is make sure that you are running with clean versions of the software, that you haven't fired up a bunch of things on your machine when we are rendering. I always do this when I'm just rendering from Revit. Close out of Revit, reopen Revit, then start your rendering process. The same would be true for Max or Showcase or anything else. Now, when I start getting in the Showcase file, you'll hear, you may or may not hear, but all my immediately, because it renders live, the graphics card kicks in right away. So that there will be some different requirements for that. So here I've got the file, and we can see that it brought in the original camera of the view I was in. So I've got that in here. I've got the scene that we're looking from. So I'm just going to come over and go from perspective. I'll go to my camera in here, and I'll go to that camera we had preset. So here I have the 3ds Max file. I brought that model in here, and I've got we can see if I turn that off, there's a different layer inside. I'll have to get to that layer in a second. But that I can go in and choose that different layer, turn that on, and do some different options in there. So here I have my 3ds Max point. I could start going in and rendering from this view, bringing the materials over, or start defining the views, start to paint the different materials on here. Now, I'm not going to necessarily get into all this, but I'll just open up a couple things saying, hey, look, here's your material editor. I've got all my standard materials that are in here, all the maps and everything else that are out. And we'll get into something I feel a little bit more later on actual rendering and picking materials and getting into this part. I don't want to spend all the time on this because we still have another piece of software to look at and kind of run through. But this is where people get a little bit of daunting on what the program can do. So we're going to go through some very simple things that we can go in and look at these particular pieces in here.
Now, did some of your materials come across from your Revit model? And so you have the base materials laid out. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. And see if I can do a quick rendering. So we won't necessarily get to see all that in here, but I think I'm going to low quality, have that run through my little window. So I will get, hopefully I always put that on low quality and check that beforehand. But I'm going to see that I do have stone that's coming over from the Revit model. I'm going to have my metal roofs, everything else. Even though it looks gray on here, I am going to get that to render and produce a pretty decent drawing just from that. And I haven't changed in the settings. So we'll spend some more time later on throughout the coming months on looking at how do I do this thing, and then some other simple animations. Now that I brought this in and I broke it up by the different categories, maybe I want to animate it where I have the walls come from the ground and the structure fly from the ceiling and the roof fly from that, and kind of have the building build itself. Or we'll do a walkthrough and actually make a door open. So as you're walking through, we can have the door open, maybe turn a light on or two as we're going through there. So this is my hope in the next coming 6 months, is to start doing some more visualization stuff like this with Max, with Showcase, and with Revit, since we're going to have some changes in there. So again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I'll just show you, hey, look, these materials did come over out of the box. I did get the Revit materials in here. Now when I start going in and changing those, I'll be changing them based off of the, I believe I picked the 3ds Max library. So now I have the 3ds Max library to kind of overwrite and do some changes in there. So you can see here's that rendering, just about done cleaning it up. Now I've got that rendering in here that I can go show my clients what's going on in here. And we'll get to other things. There's other things we can go in and start looking at making people path out for the different clients and get them to populate and stuff in here. So there's other things for animation stuff, and we'll tie into this a bit more. So now I'm going to jump back over to the Showcase portion and talk a little bit about this. So let me go back into my Revit scene, and I'm just going to minimize this in here and just a real quick walkthrough. So I have the suites workflows, and I can do the workflow manager, and I've got my two basic ones that I start out with, and now I have my custom settings in here that I can use from then on for exporting out for a particular client or whatever I want to. So my own workflows that I developed. Alrighty. So we've looked at that. Now we'll go look at the Showcase workflows. So inside here we've got obviously the settings, kind of the same thing where we get to name it, put a description under it. We have our appearances in here, and you can read all the different appearances that we can send it out. Because it's a live rendering program, once we drop it in, it's going to have these different styles that you can be using. So visual styles in here. So realistic no shadows or ambient shadows, realistic shadows. So again, have your sun kind of working in there. We can bring that over. Are using ray tracing at all in there. They have some other stylized ones. You can see one in here for tune coloring that kind of gives us a little bit more different stylized in here. And I think I might play with that a little bit later on in the year. We're talking about I'm going to do some graphic arts things, Stan, in the future. So
most of you have probably, or many of you have probably used Showcase and you didn't even know it. If you've ever visited a car dealer website or something along those lines, and you've picked the new BMW 5 Series and you want to see what it looks like in black and then in blue and then in red and then with aluminum wheels versus Cheerios wheels or whatever you will, you can pick and click and it will change the colors and so forth. That's all Showcase. That's how easy it is to change things in Showcase and show clients, or send something to clients and let them pick and click and change just like the car dealer website, and you know, kind of see what your different ideas are. So great product for that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Tony says when you drag the mic it sounds like a toilet with gravel in it.
Wow, that's I would never got that visual before, but okay. Um, so yeah, we've got a mic here. We're flipping back and forth. But thanks, Stan. Thanks for adding that comment.
Well, I just we're
supposed to be serious in
here. We're trying to make this a pleasant experience.
I don't know if that's pleasant or not.
It's not.
No, okay.
Especially to the listener.
Yeah. I apologize then. I'll pick it up from now on. Okay. So getting back into this, we can pick our visual style that we're putting in here, and now we'll look at the next part, which is going to be the background environment that we're looking at. So what are we setting up the background? As many of you may or may not know, you can have your building be in a farm, or a rural area. You can make it in a warehouse. You can put your building into different things. Showcase, as Stan was alluding to, was made for the auto industry. It's also made for product industry. So maybe if I'm designing a watch, or they have a watch that's one of their demo pieces, and they have an engine. So if you're doing different marketing for different pieces of items out there, because it's great for the inventor environment. We have these other smaller environments. So you can look at it as if you're in a conference room and kind of spin this object around. I kind of use that sometimes with clients. It's kind of nice to do is you get the conference table in there and you kind of go in the conference room that looks similar to ours, and then you show them, hey, here's your house. And then you can animate it. It looks like a little model on the table. So it's kind of a fun thing to do in there. It's a different style, and I don't see many people using it. But it's one you can use with some smaller models. And they're really going to ask a lot about the different size of model. So if the model is this size, which environment do you want to use? If it starts getting bigger or smaller, what items do you have? And they have a lot of suggestions. I didn't copy all those down, but I wanted just to show you that they're in here, and then we'll run through what each of these ones are in here. So we've got where's the ground level that we have to specify. So in my model, the 100 feet is where the ground plane's at. So if I were to import this in and not change it, it'd come in at 0, and you see my building way up at 100 feet in the sky. So if you're going in, you're building this in your site plan, and you've got your model out there at 8,250 feet, and you bring it in, you're like, where's my building? It's nowhere. I can't find it. This thing doesn't work. What's going on? And then you spin your model around, and all of a sudden, way up in the sky, you see a speck out there. That's probably your building floating around out there, and you can make it animate, spin it around, maybe land it on a witch or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, it gives you the feeling that the Wicked Witch had just before Dorothy's house fell on her.
Yeah, so you got the...
Which is a stretch.
Exactly.
A big stretch here.
So you've got different ways of doing that, and then the navigation, creating the interactive walkthrough. Looks like we can bring some of our cameras in. Yeah, I don't think so. I haven't had too much success. In fact, it's a little bit easier to do in Showcase to build those than in Revit, I think. So I tend to use the Showcase environment for bringing this in. But let's go take a look at this. Oh, yeah, one last thing. When you're bringing these environments in, they have, and I just copied a couple of these abstract backgrounds you can go in. So if you don't want to use a particular one, you can use some of the abstract or some of the ones that are built into the plan. Again, the field, the conference room table, or what have you. So now let's go take a look at Showcase, and you can see here some of the renderings done from Showcase. And let's go take a look at that. So inside here, I'll go down to my suites workflows again. You can see that I have the conceptual model. How to bring that in. I've got the interactive walkthrough, send Showcase and walkthrough interactivity, and then the realistic presentation in here. So let's take a look at what each one of these has inside. So I've got the conceptual model. Look at the settings in here. We can see visual styles, abstract shaded textures, but we can see that I can go in and do a techie one that's kind of stylized, and it's got a line outlines for everything that's on here. The shaded textures, we got the tune color that's out there, ray tracing, those ones we were looking at before. The default environment, so the white room, an abstract. But we can see in here we've got the black and white, the generic, a gradient, which has been somewhat nice. I've got a grass field for a building size, and we should talk about the size of your projects too. This school is about as big as you kind of want to get in there with an environment that's kind of pre-built without building your own. it's going to be a little bit too small. So if you get to a large campus or something like that, first of all, you're going to need a pretty beefy machine to handle it. To work with these things in here. So you're either going to have to make your own environment for a really big project or just use a gradient background. Seems to be a nice one that's in here. But you can see different sizes out there. Large scale environments, again, environment, ground plane. The bottom model, I ask the user, so I can just use the bottom the model, but if I have basement levels or something like that, I'm going to have to go out there and pick what that level is going to be at 100 feet in there. And then create a walk zone for interactive walkthrough for the different processes there. Then we have the information. I didn't click on this last time, but we can see what applications going through, so different versions in here just to provide that for us. Okay, so I've got that one. Let's go close it and look at another one, the interactive walkthrough settings in here, and just to see. This one happens to be using the grass fields in there and the ground plane level. So I'm going to set that at the bottom, and I'll actually run this one. I'm going to actually set the grass fields in here because I think this model is bigger than the specified size, or I could slide this over. And those shadows and ambient shadows looks pretty good there, so let's hit run and launch this one. It takes a couple minutes to go through, but it's actually, again, not that bad. So I can active showcase session since I already have that open. Continue running through it so that I don't spend as much time opening it. Showcase does take me a little bit of time to open up on my machine. It's not a 20 seconds. It can take a couple minutes to actually fire up. So I have that running already, and we'll see that run through.
Once you get into Showcase, though, it is easy to use. The rendering isn't quite the quality that you're going to get from the cloud rendering or the 3D Max, although it's pretty darn good.
Actually, I think it's.
Is it?
It's way better. But let me take a step back.
Yeah, that it's easy to use to the point where it's a good tool to use early on as you're conceptualizing things, as you're kind of pinning down the designs and so forth, and then when you, and it's a good way to kind of check your rendering and your materials and so forth quickly before you commit to 3D Max or something like that, which does take quite a bit longer to render in at times. So, but with the 3D Max, you're usually going to go for a much higher, more truly photorealistic rendering style.
Yeah, Showcase definitely isn't going to get all the way up where you can pull Max, but it's going to get a lot further than it will in Revit. What we'll also find is that in Showcase, what you see on the screen right away isn't actually the final rendering. We can actually pump it up a bit more by just selecting a couple other things. It does take a couple minutes to actually do the rendering, so it's not exactly live, but hopefully what you guys see on the screen is what we're seeing in here, and it's actually doing a pretty good job. So let me fire that up, and we can see, there is my model. And, it didn't respect the ground plane, so there I am floating at 100 feet. But you can see, hey, there's that Wicked Witch of the West type view inside here. So I've got that model, and maybe I forgot to totally change it.
The trees are kind of floating around there, too.
Yeah. Let's see if I can grab everything in here. This might take a second. And kapow. Oops, a little too heavy.
Boom.
There we go. We crushed her.
It's the rubber spool.
So last time I did this, it went right to ground plane because I specified the height. But you can see right now I'm in that showcase environment, still a little bit off the ground. It still looks a little bit floaty. But here it is on the screen. Out of the box, these are the Revit materials that we have. And I've already got stone and everything shown in here. Now, we'd like to say that this program is easy to use. There's about 12 buttons you want to know. And this is what the environment looks like. So we have the cube. Here is what it's not even a ribbon, it's just the menu that we can select from in here. So if I can go to view, I've got the navigation in here, selection. But I'm going to get an appearance. I've got my material library. So I've got my materials in here. I can go in, I'm going to select one of these walls. right-click and just say, select all the material properties in here, so you can select everything. Funny enough, something in the roof is also stone. I thought that was kind of hilarious to do. So I can come down here and I've got my different types of materials. So you can Autodesk materials. I've got the Showcase materials inside, and maybe I'll type stone. Hit enter. There we go. Some stonework in here. So now I can go in and say, well, I want to use this particular stone instead. And you can see in a matter of seconds it just changed that over. If I want to pick maybe this river rock and switch that over, I've got that almost instantaneous. It's about the count of 3 is what I'm seeing on my machine to use that in here. So I can go in and change the materials, or go in and do different options in here. Whoops. So inside here I've got a story mode, so I've got different alternates. So if I wanted to do alternate 1 or 2, let me go back and hit undo real quick. And so I'll create visible lineup. So materials line up, and I've got alternate 1. And then let's go back in and do the materials. Pick that stone again. Now I've got an alternate 2, so I can switch back and forth here from alternate 1, alternate 2. So we can see it's pretty easy to go in and set these different styles up in here. So if I want to show a client one or the other, I can preset this, and then I can get into actually doing the story mode where I get to use a storyboard. And in the storyboard, I just create a different scene. So I've got this one scene in here. Actually, before I do that, I should probably get in and do a camera shot. So that's going to be T. Close the materials browser here by hitting M. Go in here and create a shot. So start to end. So I got my start. Now I'll go to the end scene. And, oops. Wow, I'll just get in here real quick and, oops. Go in here in the environment.
And what you're seeing on your screen, I'm watching the broadcast screen, and it's a lot jerkier than Brian's screen over the other direction here, so it's not near as jerky as it looks like it is on your screen right now. It's pretty smooth flowing.
Yeah, it really does it. So here I'm going to go in and just do a slight gentle preview, and it's probably going to go really jerky on your machine, but it's as smooth as butter on this end.
It is.
So we're able to do that. And again, we're running several pieces of software, but we've got this transition that's going on. What's nice about this is if I've gone in and done this shot, I can switch over to the materials at any time I want. So if the client has a particular question about one or the other, I can just click and say, hey, I want to see this, or I want to see that, or end that particular thing. Once we've got this done, now I'll come, whoops, get rid of this guy. I can go, come on. Go back in here and add my different scenes. So I can go in here and choose a shot, bring the one shot in, and go in and choose my behaviors or my alternates. When alternate 1 is going to be, go in and add alternate 2. And so halfway during this play, because I'm basically making a little movie in here, have it go in and play this. So I start with one material, and then I don't have to do anything. I can just sit back and have it switch over, have doors open, make some things move around on the screen, things like that. So it's a really nice program to have for those of you that have never seen this environment before. So one I'm really in love with. I like this thing, again, because I can do this right with the client right next to me, and it seems to be a really nice area to interact with them.
Well, or you can pack it up nicely, a little movie like that. You can pack up nicely and send over, and the client can play it on their system without having to have the software in place. They can just run your little movie. So that's pretty cool too. Brian, we have a couple questions here. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to give you time to cover, but we do have a couple questions.
Okay.
Kirby asks, once you have defined materials for, hopefully everybody can hear me, once you have defined materials for objects in Showcase, can you translate those changes back into the Revit model? In other words, kind of, I guess, is it backwards compatible?
Showcase is not backwards compatible, so whatever materials you have in Showcase will not push over into Revit. 3ds Max does have some capabilities of doing some of that in there. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into just specific things about 3ds Max. But 3ds Max does have the ability to get some interaction back and forth between the program. We'll talk about at what level, but Showcase does not. It's one directional. It's from Revit into Showcase, and that's about it.
And Rick, I think that answers your question. And Dwight, I apologize. I think I misunderstood your question. I think I thought you meant were we taking back into previous versions of the software, but I think you meant are we able to take materials backwards. So there we go.
There is some capability of that. I can go into Revit, and I have my different libraries available to me. So I can go in here and choose from the AEC materials library, which Showcase will read, and the Autodesk materials library. So switching back and forth, all three programs have access to these particular libraries in here. So if I'm in the Showcase, I'll go back into the materials. I've got my Showcase materials, my Autodesk materials library that I can go in and pull from. And then I can go in and add another library. So if I have some libraries that I want to show between the three programs, I can use those throughout the process, if you were. So hopefully this has been educational. I don't know if do we have any other questions out there, Stan?
No,
okay.
No more questions right now.
All right. So I've got one last thing just to kind of do that I wanted to show, and that was pretty much, I have another last poll. Since we're doing all this stuff, I want to find out a little bit more about what you guys want to see, you know.
We'll be continuing this series in the future, and it's pretty fast-moving and jam-packed, but we want to know what you'd like to see as well. I can only imagine Brian sitting here doing hand-colored renderings and on screen. I don't know how that's going to work. But.
Yeah, I had some people go in for the hand rendering. I have no problem doing that, and let's do a camera. You can see my beautiful face, and everybody's always talking about my new addition to my beautiful face.
Yeah, well.
All right, seems like we've got going to close the poll here in just a second. About a couple more seconds for you guys. All right, I'll close that up and show us what we got. So definitely looks like some people just want to know more about Revit, 25% of you. But then there's a strong for half of you want to see all three, or at least two of the three out there. So I know I didn't give different choices on which one. One person wants to go see hand rendering, so hey, maybe I'll get to show it to you, Stan. So we'll look at that, and definitely people for 3ds Max. So we'll bring in more of the 3ds Max side. Again, you can see we're just underneath our hour, about our hour time now. So it's, you know, we'll get into more of these later on. Hopefully, you guys are finding this useful. Again, if you have different specific things you want to see, you can email us and let us know. You know, hey, Brian, I want to know more about 3ds Max and animation, or how to put people in it, or how to do a walkthrough, or how to do daylighting analysis, or things like that. Hey, maybe just a whole thing on Showcase and everything it can do. I think I can cover that in about an hour, hour and a half on a lot of the stuff, and how to do some of those things in here, give you a really nice tidbits out there. But there's also a webinar that already covered that. So there's some different workflows that we can kind of pre-program some of these things, do a Martha Stewart. Hey, this is the finished item. Here's the start of it, and this is how you get from one to the other.
Ryan, I want to let everybody know as we close up here as well. This is recorded. It will be posted on our website probably in the next week or so if you want to sit through it again. The other thing I'd like to let everybody know is that Brian Juge, along with Michael Calkins and Brian Haley, were just notified that they are in the top 5 instructors in North America by Autodesk for Autodesk training centers, and that CAD-1 won the award for the top training center of the year this year. And all 5 of our instructors are in the top 10 North America. So we feel really honored, and we really appreciate the job these guys do to keep us in that kind of place in the ATC channel.
And
so
it's
congratulations.
Thank you, Stan. And it's really because of you guys out there. We're rated by our clients, so it's up to you guys to place us in that top. So we're honored that you guys think highly of us and the job we're doing here. So hopefully you guys get a lot out of this. And again, we love having you. We love your input. So if you have anything else, sometimes we're maybe not on the right course on what we want to show. So, give us some tips on what you want to see.
All right. Thanks very much, and we'll see you on the next webinar. We have Civil Chat on Thursday morning. We're going to make Carla do that by herself.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me sit in, guys.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.